Is it a secret that I have a love-hate relationship with the Hyuga Clan? Let me be frank. The Hyuga Clan is one of the coolest clans in all of Naruto. Their beautiful white Byakugan, total chakra control, and perhaps the coolest taijutsu style in all of the series. While I still prefer the Sharingan to the Byakugan in almost every capacity, the Byakugan's visual prowess is second to none. Being more observant than even the Uchiha, though Sasuke's abilities displayed in the movie Bonds, in which he emulates the gentle fist to defeat Dr. Shinno, might be an outlier, they naturally see far better than other users of dojutsu, and their ability to control chakra from every point in their body makes them the scalpels in Konoha's box of blunt instruments. Cold and logical, they stand as the direct opposite of the Uchiha. Where the Uchiha favored clan over village, the Hyuga believed their clan should be willing to die for Konoha. Where loyalty to their clansmen and love of equality were in the personality traits of the Uchiha, the Hyuga cared very little for their own family members and had a strict and cruel caste system within their clan to ensure everyone had their jobs and that the abilities of their clan would remain forever unknown to all. That's why, despite the Byakugan being basically useless to anyone who isn't a Hyuga, it's still highly sought after, a greed that has nearly thrown the world into chaos time and time again. That's where I heavily disagree with the Hyuga. The Uchiha did some nasty stuff, and their desire to overthrow the village likely had them earn their downfall, though one could understand their point of view. But despite these differences, when I look at the Uchiha, I see a tightly knit family that simply wants to be accepted and loved the way they accept and love the others. The Hyuga, on the other hand, I can't stand because their cruel treatment of their own family members, their own brothers, sisters, and cousins, has left a bad taste in my mouth, nearly to the point where I detest them in a Neji-style fashion. They also had character growth through the series, and I will give credit where credit is due, but the fundamental problems in their lifestyle and their treatment of others has left me believing that the Hyuga have not taken due stock of their priorities, nor were they filled with much love for anyone. The only thing they share in common with the Uchiha is an intense pride that, while drawn from very different sources, burns as white-hot as their lifeless eyes that have the ability to see anything but the truth. And so, due to the fact that they're essentially the polar opposites of the Uchiha clan, I can't help but wonder, what if the Hyuga fell instead? Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. We've also noticed that a lot of folks who watch our videos aren't actually subscribed to our channel. We get it, YouTube does do a very good job of getting you what you want to watch, but if you want to ensure that you never miss a video, and if you just want to support us, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. Before I begin, I need to say something. I'm going to change a few things to help the story work better. First off, I'm going to make Neji the same age as the canonical Itachi to help better maintain the timeline. But I'm not pulling these years out of thin air. I plan to, in return, kidify Itachi so that he would be about the age canonical Neji was. Basically, they're switching birthdays. In this way, I plan to make Itachi and Sasuke twins because that's just flat out adorable. And now, without further ado, let's get into the story. The night was silent. The crickets had stopped their song. No lanterns or candles could be seen, no lights in the buildings. Despite this, the dead silent night was illuminated by the full moon, the eye of Hamada gazing down upon this, seeing all, a halo of ice crystals encircling it in the sky like frozen tears drifting in the empty void. Neji looked up at the moon and took a breath. Was this relief? A sigh of dull emotion? Or perhaps he was merely attempting to catch his breath? What was it? Why was he out of breath? He thought back. In his mind's eye, he replayed the events leading up to this moment. The Hyuga affair, or so it was called, was what happened when a filthy Kumo-nin under the guise of an olive branch attempted to kidnap Hinata and take from her the Byakugan. Hiashi had done what any father could have and should have done. He killed the bastard. To that, Neji gave Hiashi credit. There was not anything wrong with what Hiashi had done in defending his daughter, and if he had been so caring of all of his family, Neji would not have felt as he did now. But what happened next? That was unforgivable. Hiashi, having killed the shinobi, was now the target of Kumo's ire. Kumo and Konoha were at war, and this was their last chance at peace. But it was a peace that should be built on trust, and Kumo had broken that trust first. It was Neji's opinion that Konoha bring all the power they had to bear and drop it on the accursed village hidden in the clouds. But no, Konoha and the Hyuga didn't desire that. In their spineless natures, they decided it was best to appease Kumo. They knew what Kumo had done and what they wanted, and they were nearly ready to give it to them. But the issue with this was that Hiyashi refused to take responsibility for his actions. Kumo wanted Hiyashi dead, but Hiyashi didn't wish to die, so what's a rotten clan head to do? Perhaps he should pass it off on someone else. It just so happened that Hiyashi had a brother, a twin, one who was merely seconds younger than him. The man's name was Hisashi, and he was Neji's father. It was decided by Hiyashi, as well as the elder, the man who just so happened to be Hiyashi and Hisashi's father, that it would be best to kill Hisashi and send him to the village hidden in the clouds. And that's exactly what they did. Neji's father had taken the rap for his brother and was killed against his will for the sake of the village and clan. 10 lousy damn seconds. That was all that stood in the way of Neji and his father being main branch members. And if such a thing had been so, no doubt this would not have happened. But it was now too late to cry over spilt milk. Neji boiled over this. More than once, his anger overtook him, and he would say something snide, or even nearly come to blows with his uncle and grandfather, and every time they would resort to the seal on his forehead to pacify him. Such a helpless feeling, so crushing. To be stuck, feeling a hatred that refuses to abate until paid for in blood, yet unable to satisfy it because of a cruel mark that bound you forever as a slave to the people who murdered your own father. People who were supposed to be your family. How many times had he drawn blood from his lip, biting it so hard as he saw the main branch family walk by? They'd caused so much suffering. In a world where he already lacked his freedom, they pushed more suffering upon him to simply make their lives even easier than they already were. Caught in despair, Neji had for a time considered ending his own life, throwing himself into the Naka River. After all, in his eyes, it was better to die free than to live a slave. It was there, however, that he met a man with a swirling mask. Who was he? Neji did not know. All he knew him as was Ghost. The man spoke to Neji and told him that he also had a grudge against the Hyuga. The main branch flaunted its power over the secondary branch, and the secondary branch remained silent. Perhaps there was nothing they could do, but to so easily resign themselves to such a life was pitiful. This Ghost told Neji that they needed to scrape away any connection to the past. They needed to rebuild the clan from the ground up, and further needed to rework the way the world worked if they wanted to ensure that nobody ever had to suffer the same way ever again. Despite this, Neji didn't feel as if he could agree to this. He told the masked man that he was branded with the cursed seal of the caged bird, and because of this, he was unable to do anything against his clan. The masked man would scoff at this and tell him it was trivial. Reaching his hand up, he released the seal on Neji's head. Neji wondered how this man could so easily remove the curse mark placed by the elders of the Hyuga. The man stood there silent for a moment as Neji's mind tried to understand what just happened. How does it feel, Neji? To be truly free. The cage opened, the bird allowed to soar. Neji was almost moved to tears by this. I'm free. Ghost's single visible eye narrowed. And what do you want with this freedom? Neji looked up. I want to expunge the main branch from existence. I want them to suffer. Then, maybe, they can feel a hint of pain, even a single iota of what I felt. Ghost would clap his hands. Then we are in agreement. Blood for blood, lives for lives. We will end the tyrannical reign of the main branch. And then we will offer the freedom of death to the blinded secondary branch members. And so, Neji and the Ghost made their way back to the Hyuga Clan compound. There, Neji wasted no time making his way toward the main branch's home, his eyes full of bloodlust, his heart beating to the sound of the drums of war. Ghost split off from Neji and made his way to the main living area of the secondary branch, leaving Hiyashi and the others to Neji, knowing in his prodigious nature Neji could handle them just fine. Neji made his way into the building. There he was met by Natsu Hyuga, who was surprised to see him arrive so late. He looked to her, his veins bulging in his temples. Natsu was filled with a sudden sense of dread and horror. Before she could say a word, a blade was dragged across his stomach, carving through flesh and organ alike. Startled, she fell back, blood beginning to trickle from her lips. He walked on, leaving her to her fate. His blade dripping as he walked deeper, he opened the door to the main living quarters where both Hiyashi and the elders stood. They turned to look at him, surprised at his appearance so late in the night. Neji, why have you intruded upon our private conversation? The elder asked, crossing his arms, waiting for what he hoped would be a damn good explanation. Why are you carrying a blade, and why is it bloody? Neji closed the door behind him as he stepped into the light. Lowering his hood, he let up a smile. How many years have I waited for this? How many years have I dreamt of this? Now the moment is here, and I don't know which of my fantasies to live through. He took a step forward, his steps increasing in speed into nearly a sprint. The elder was shocked. Neji stepped into the swing like a batter aiming for a home run. However, instead of holding a bat, it was a katana, and instead of a baseball, it was one grouchy old man's worthless head. His blade made contact with the elder's neck, cleaving it from his body. Hiyashi was in total shock. He was so startled by this that he nearly forgot what to do. He raised his fingers to activate the curse mark in hopes of completely frying the nerve endings in Neji's brain. Neji laughed at this, removing his forehead protector to show that there was no curse mark. Hiyashi was startled by this. Neji touched the tip of the blade to Hiyashi's chest. "Do me a favor, and I may spare your youngest daughter. Say his name." Hiyashi was confused. "What?" Neji's smile turned into a furious snarl as he kicked Hiyashi in the face. "My father! The man you had murdered in your place! Say his name! I want it to be the last thing on your lips before I send you to hell!" Hiyashi was wiping the blood from his nose. "Hisashi!" Neji would press the blade through his heart. Twisting it a little, he pulled the blade back and walked on, finding Hinata's room where she lay in bed sleeping. At the other end of the room was a crib containing Hanabi. Neji stepped up to Hinata as she awakened to see him. She screamed out as if he were a monster, seeing him covered in blood. He spoke. "I should have been you." He raised his blade to strike her down, respectful of her youth and innocence subverting his just vengeance. He wanted it to be over quickly for her so she wouldn't suffer. His blade still dripping, he looked down on her and found himself taken out of his own head for but a moment, realizing what he had just done to the girl he had sworn to give his life for. What had he done? He shook his head to snap out of it. Justice. It was justice. I shouldn't have even been forced into her service to start with. Coming back to himself, he heard crying. Walking to the crib, he looked in at the child, Hanabi. Merely 2 years old, barely old enough to talk, barely old enough to remember anything. If the Hyuga's innocence could be condensed and personified, Hanabi was currently that. Despite his contempt for her family, he was still shaken by the murder of Hinata. He couldn't have killed her if he wanted to, but that being said, he had also given his word that he would spare her if Hiyashi had said the name of his father as he died, and Hiyashi had. Neji flicked his blade through the air, splattering blood onto the tatami carpet below. He then returned it to its saya, looking at the crying baby as it looked up to him in terror as if seeing the monster under its bed manifest under the light of the moon. He placed his hand over Hanabi's mouth and raised a finger to his own. Hanabi, in terror, would begin to hiccup, yet somehow managing to hold back from wailing. Neji turned and left. He left the building back into the night, where blood ran from every door like a river. From one of the homes came the ghost, his body littered with at least 5 different katanas, yet he strode about as if they meant nothing, like he were a porcupine paying no mind to its quills. He approached Neji as he slowly started pulling the blades and tossing them to the ground, regenerating nearly immediately afterward. "You sure took long enough," the man said, looking at the blood and the half-cocked smile. "Seems you enjoyed yourself. A bit too much, perhaps." Neji grit his teeth. "The fools got what they deserved. My only regret was that I didn't make them suffer more." The ghost stared silently at him. It was hard to gauge what this masked man was thinking, though it likely ranged from anywhere between disgust to pride in this boy's statement. The masked man, having removed every sword from his body, turned to leave. Neji called out to him, "Where are you going?" The man looked back. "Can't stay here, can we? We just committed an act of genocide. Konoha's gonna come through here eventually, and when they do, they're gonna be pissed. I don't think either of us should be here when that happens, wouldn't you agree?" Neji did agree. His life in Konoha was over. Wherever he set down roots, wherever he recreated the Hyuga clan, it wouldn't be here. He was about to have the highest bounty in Konoha's bingo book. The single most influential clan besides the Uchiha had just been massacred, and it was Neji who had done it. And so he left the village with this masked man. But to his surprise, when it came time, or so Neji had expected, for the two to part, the masked man instead invited him to join his plan. "Plan?" Neji asked. "What plan?" The masked man raised a finger to his cheekbone, mocking a pondering face. "The step to our revenge. Total destruction of Kumogakure. Wouldn't you like to see that village that killed your father burn?" Neji scoffed a laugh and looked away as if assuming this were a joke, but something in him knew that this man was serious, and even worse, his mind began to wonder if he could do it. He looked back at the man. "It would be a dream, but like most of the fantasies I have as I go to sleep, it's impossible." The man smiled with his eyes. "Wasn't the destruction of the Hyuga clan an impossible dream?" Neji considered it and decided to take the bait. Alright, I'll bite. How do you plan to do this? The man found a place to rest. He needed to focus on what he was going to say, how best to articulate his plan to Neji, and he needed Neji to focus on his words. He then began to explain. The moon. Neji stood there and looked up at it. The moon. The man nodded. We're going to drop it on Kumo and every other hidden village. We're going to wipe out the entire shinobi world at once, alongside its darkness. Neji laughed. The moon! We're gonna drop the moon! He laughed harder and then wiped the tears from his eyes, but then he grew more serious. And how do you expect to drop the moon on the shinobi villages? The man did not seem pleased that he was being joked about, but he swallowed his pride. After all, who wouldn't laugh at a plan that sounded so crazy? This was why he had to stop in the first place, knowing that his plan would require him to explain how one could control the moon. He began to speak. Neji, do you know about the origins of the Byakugan? Do you know where your eye comes from? Neji thought about it for a moment. Mutation? Likely a similar case to all dojutsu. You're both right and wrong. Wrong in saying that it's merely a mutation, and right in saying that its origins tie into all dojutsu. The Sharingan, the Ketsuryugan, the Byakugan. These are but a few of the possibilities that exist, and among humans, the Sharingan and Byakugan are the most plentiful. But they were not a symbol of mutation or adaptation. No, they're all inherited from a distant clan of celestial beings from which the Sage of Six Paths is descended. Neji was starting to stutter and stumble in disbelief, and then it kicked in. Another smile. He didn't believe him. How could he? Talk of celestial beings? The Sage of Six Paths? The Sage was a myth. He did not exist and was created by shinobi to embody the will of fire and what it meant to be enlightened. You plan to destroy the shinobi world with a bedtime story. The man shook his head. No, it is real, and I can prove it. Neji once more took the bait. He stood and followed the man who led him deeper. Through here, he said as they passed into a cave. The man spoke. There are many such caves as this, doorways through space and time. And if one knows where they are, one may travel anywhere, at any time. And they all share a single nexus. One place where all roads meet. A singularity point. He led him in and the two slowly found themselves falling. Rushing down through what felt like water, they eventually found themselves ascending. Coming up through another cave, they found themselves in an ancient city. A city that contained the lore of the occurrence of Chakra, the origin of modern society descended from ancient times. But this was not what the man wanted to show him. No, he led him out of the city and up toward the surface. There, stepping out onto the white ground, Neji witnessed it for the first time. The hovering earth in the ethereal darkness. Where are we? He asked with a hint of frantic disbelief in his voice. The man held his arms out wide and turned in a circle. This is the moon. Neji looked around. How did you find this place? The man began walking again, leading him toward a lone structure on the white dusted rock. It was by chance that I found this place. But then again, karma must be equaled, and this is my due return. He led Neji inside. The Uchiha believed that they were the only ones with a stone monument. Not so. He showed them a stone slab within the structure, a castle dusty and in disrepair. This stone can only be read by one possessing the blood of Hamura strongly, those of the Hyuga who possess a Byakugan. This speaks of a forgotten dojutsu from which all Byakugan were descended, the legendary and mythical Tenseigan, a dojutsu whose abilities surpass even that of the Rinnegan. With it, gravitational forces, the will of the universe, fate itself will be ours to command. Life and death, rebirth. And that is what I hope to bring to the world, rebirth. Let the former world pass away, euthanize the sick dog so it may be reborn anew. A world without war, without pain, without shinobi. A world where all are truly free to follow their own path. Neji stood there and looked at it. Why did you approach me? The man looked back. I sought a partner, someone who shared my ideals, and you were the perfect choice. Neji continued to stare at him, his eyes remaining doubtful. You could have taken any of the Hyuga. Why did you choose me specifically? Or let me rephrase, what were you doing at the Naka River that day when I was about to throw myself off the cliff? The man stood there silently. Neji followed this up with one final, very important question. Who are you? The man blinked silently for a moment. Finally, he took a breath in the form of a sigh, as if he were attempting to decide whether or not to speak. Neji then decided for him. If you really want me to help you, then you need me to trust you. And you're never going to get me to trust you so long as you hide your identity. Who are you? The man looked up at him with a click of his tongue. Slowly, he undid the strap holding his mask on. He removed the mask from his face to show none other than the face of Hisashi Hyuga himself. Neji was startled by this. "Father, no, impossible, he was killed." Neji pulled a blade. "I don't know who you are, but if you're using the face of my father as some twisted joke, I'll kill you just as I did the others." Hisashi smiled. "It truly is me, my son. Do you remember the day you were branded with the cursed seal? Do you remember what happened?" Neji nodded. Hisashi continued. "I maintained my composure before going home with you, where I locked myself away in my room and cried. My contempt for the clan solidified that day, and the day my life was taken from me, I remembered only you. Your face was the last on my mind as I perished. It is indeed me." Neji's grip on his katana intensified, though his stance slightly relaxed. "How?" Hisashi stood there and looked around as if deep in thought himself. "Rebirth, my son." Neji took a step forward, his stance growing a bit more combat-oriented. "No, no more riddles. You owe me an answer." Hisashi sighed once more. "I suppose I do." He sat down. "The day I was killed, I saw my life flash before my eyes. From what I surmise, my body truly was delivered to Kumo. But at that time, my Byakugan were already sealed, so they were of no use to Kumo. Whatever happened after that is a mystery to me. I was in the land of the dead. I saw old friends, allies from my time in the Third Shinobi World War. I thought I had found some sort of peace, but as I was starting to get settled, a chain from the lower world wrapped around me and began to pull me back. Unable to resist, I awakened. The state of my body was not what it had been. I felt dirty, sinful, like an abomination, an affront to nature, and that's exactly what I am. An impure reincarnation, closer to a half-resurrection. "How did you come back?" Neji asked. Hisashi raised his hand to explain that he was getting to that. "I awakened and saw a snake." Neji grimaced. "Orochimaru." Hisashi further explained his story. "I awakened, that snake of a man standing over me. He stated that he had rediscovered the second Hokage's crown jewel, his biggest achievement in ninjutsu, a forbidden technique to which none were allowed to use after its development. The impure world reincarnation jutsu. You see, with special commands achieved through sealing formulas and one's own chakra, they can take a living soul and overwrite their genetic structure, as well as their spirit, with one of the deceased, so long as the catcher possesses some direct DNA from the one they wish to reincarnate. With this method, Orochimaru gave me new life. But this life was not one without cost. Once again, I was a slave. Orochimaru's grip over me was tight, and I found myself only holding on because of my compliance. You see, he had the ability to suppress my consciousness the moment I stepped out of line, and so my only options were to follow his orders or have my mind reduced to a mere shell. Neji by this time had taken a seat. "Then how did you get away?" Hisashi smiled. "Karma. Good karma. Having suffered in life as much as I had, I was due for good things to happen to me. It just so happened that I discovered the hand signs Orochimaru used to control me. A situation that should have been impossible when considering how conscientious Orochimaru is. But I managed to free myself from his grasp. The chains were broken, but I didn't run away. Not yet. I played my part further, getting information on current world events, information on various projects, and anything else I could get my hands on. And when I no longer needed Orochimaru, I simply snuck up behind him and killed him. He never expected it. He never saw it coming. From there, I snuck out and went into hiding. Nobody could know that I was still alive, not if I planned to get my revenge. It was by chance that the cave I decided to hide in possessed a secret portal that led here, and it was from here that I learned of the Hyuga's origins, the origins of our Byakugan, and the primal reversion that allows us to gain more power by returning to the root of our dojutsu. The moment I learned these things, a plan began to form, and it was you that I needed for that plan. It was good that I kept my eyes on you. If I had not, you would not be here today." Neji stood there and clicked his katana back into place, locking it down. "So, does this mean you're alive or dead? The wounds you shrugged off would kill any normal person." Hisashi looked at his hands, cracks running through them, through his face and body. His sclera were dark as midnight, causing his Byakugan to come across as simply a pair of white orbs floating in a void set within his head. "I don't know the answer to that question, but considering what I feel deep within my soul, I believe I'm neither. I'm neither living nor dead. I'm undead, tethered to this existence simply by my grudge against the shinobi world. My reason for living is to see this unfair, unjust world burn, and from those ashes, a new world will be reborn. A world where my son sits upon a throne, his unending potential laid bare for all to see." "The Tenseigan," Neji said. Hisashi smiled. Yes, the Tenseigan. Your Tenseigan. Neji smirked. What do we need to accomplish this? Hisashi stood once more. We need but two things. Chakra from a set of reincarnations. The reincarnations of Indra and Ashura Otsutsuki. Neji stood there silent for a moment before speaking. Fair. Now tell me, who are these reincarnations? Naruto and Sasuke were racing through the forest together. The two boys had been close since birth, and that was mostly because Fugaku and Makoto Uchiha had basically adopted him. Their house was full, as was their hearts. 3 boys, all about the same age. As rough as that seemed, knowing how rowdy boys can be, it wasn't really that bad. These boys were mostly low maintenance because they had the others to play with, and therefore they left Fugaku alone to do his work. But on occasions, every so often, Fugaku would leave his office for the nearby forests, where he would round the boys up for a rousing game of tag. But the kind of tag they played was closer to a shinobi sparring session. This meant cheating to a point was allowed. The only rule that Fugaku expected them to follow was, if you're tagged, you're out. And right now, Fugaku was on their tails. His Sharingan active. He had an unfair advantage of size, strength, and ability over them in a way that seemed nearly hopeless for them. But this was exactly what they needed. You didn't grow if all you did was succeed. Sometimes they would play survival tag, and the winner wasn't decided by who didn't get tagged, but by the one who was the last to get tagged. But it wasn't only the kids who needed training, but Fugaku himself. So sometimes he would add an extra stipulation. If you make it to the door of the Naka Shrine, you will have beaten me. And right now, every boy was running like their life depended on it toward the Naka Shrine. And in the sense of imagination, their life did depend on it. Because in each of their minds, they believed themselves to be in the Third Shinobi World War. Rushing back to base with hidden intel on enemy encampments or some super weapon that would turn the tide. Fugaku kept chasing them, moving from tree to tree. Sasuke looked over his shoulder and saw Fugaku. "He's coming!" he shouted. To his right was Naruto, who was younger than Sasuke by just a few months, and to his left was his twin brother Itachi, who was older by 4 minutes. Sasuke then spoke to them. "Peel off, we have the number advantage. He can't chase all 3 of us at once." Naruto nodded and Itachi did as well. The 2 boys went in completely separate directions. Sasuke, however, continued to run straight. Without so much as slowing down, Fugaku kept up the chase, his eyes already set on Sasuke. He continued to jump through the tree limbs. Fugaku was catching up. Sasuke knew he couldn't outrun his father like this. He may have been lighter, but his legs were smaller, which meant the gait of his stride was much smaller. He only had one chance to get away. As Fugaku got close, Sasuke leapt lightly and instead gripped the next limb loosely with his fingers and swung from it into another tree's trunk, where he pushed off of it and hit the ground rolling before he suddenly rose to his feet and began rushing in the direct opposite direction. He knew that it would take far longer for his father to turn around and catch up, and this decision caught Fugaku by surprise. Damn, he's getting good. But the issue with this was that Sasuke forgot that his father knew the multi-shadow clone jutsu. He realized too late that the Fugaku who had been chasing him was a clone. Suddenly, a set of kunai flew from a bush. Sasuke saw them, but it was too late, and he was pinned to the nearest tree trunk by the kunai and his own sleeves. Opening his eyes, he saw Fugaku approach. "You're too late," Sasuke shouted with a sly smile. "We're gonna get away." Fugaku smiled at his son. "Are you so sure?" Fugaku approached his son. "Time to see if you have the true shinobi metal to keep your base's location secret after a little advanced interrogation." Sasuke gulped as Fugaku raised his sleeves. Fingers going straight to the ribs, he tickled Sasuke as hard as he could. Naruto was running when he suddenly heard Sasuke's voice from the forest behind him rising over the treetops, scaring away the birds. He sighed and made the sign of the cross. "My poor brother in arms, rest in spaghetti, never forgetty. I'll remember your sacrifice." He then made his way to a secret treehouse that was created for just such an occasion. There he met up with Itachi. "Sasuke has fallen. The mission rests on us now," Naruto said. Itachi pulled out a map, obviously taking this game way too seriously. He pointed to a red X. "This is us." He then pointed to a red circle on the map. "And this is the Naka Shrine. If we take this path right here, we should be able to sneak by without being seen." Naruto looked at the map and shook his head. "No, that's too roundabout. It'll take forever to get there, and time is of the essence. I think we should take this path. It's straighter." Itachi shook his head. "No, we can't take that one. It goes straight through an open field. It's the most obvious choice for us to take." Fugaku then pointed to a place on the map. "You should take this path here. It's a ravine and has plenty of cover." Naruto nodded. "Yeah, that's perfect." He gave Fugaku a high five. Suddenly, Naruto realized what had happened. "Damn it, I've been tagged." Fugaku ruffled Naruto's hair a bit. "You did a lot better this time, Naruto. You'll have me one of these days, I just know it." Fugaku then took off after Itachi, who had left the moment Fugaku entered the room. Itachi was by far the fastest of the bunch, and keeping up with him was a real chore. "How do those tiny legs move so fast?" Fugaku asked as he watched Itachi move. Itachi jumped from one limb to the next, and as he did, he spun in a circle and threw off a set of shuriken. "360 no scope!" he shouted as his shuriken hit the tree limb, snapping as soon as Fugaku stepped on it, causing him to fall. Fugaku hit the ground hard. He sat up and rubbed the back of his neck. "Alright, shit's on now," Fugaku said as he activated his Mangekyo Sharingan. He began chasing after Itachi again. Itachi kept running. He saw it. It was right there. All he had to do was get to it. He hit the clearing and began running across the stone toward the Naka Shrine's door. Suddenly, a kunai struck the ground in front of him and he tripped on it. Hitting the ground, he looked back and saw it, and just then made eye contact with Fugaku. Itachi frantically started crawling toward the door. "I just gotta touch it." He reached out as far as he could, and at that moment, the game was over. Fugaku knelt there, gripping Itachi's ankles as Itachi's hand was 6 inches short of the door. Fugaku smiled. "Tag, you're it." Itachi's heart shattered. I would have won. I would have made it." Fugaku stood and clicked his tongue with a smile. "Woulda, coulda, shoulda. On the battlefield, a hair's width is the difference between life and death, and you just died, buddy boy." Fugaku grinned. He opened his right eye to peek at Itachi, who was still laying there. There was the sound of light sobbing. Suddenly, Fugaku's sweet victory turned a little bitter as he realized that he had got a little too competitive with his 7-year-old son. He pulled Itachi up to his feet and sat him on his rear, noticing that he had scraped up his knees when he tripped. Suddenly, Fugaku felt like his #1 dad mug was smashed. He pulled Itachi's hair from his face and spoke. "You know, this is the furthest you've ever made it. And honestly, this is the first time I've ever had to resort to my Mangekyo just to beat you. Honestly, if I were even 1 second shorter, then I would have been beaten by you. That's impressive." Itachi still seemed a little upset. Fugaku put his hand on his shoulder. "Itachi." The boy looked up, his large eyes overflowing with tears. Fugaku smiled. "I am proud of you. So much. You're far stronger than I would have ever expected. And that 360 no-scope thing you did? Style points. I couldn't have ever asked for better kids. Honestly, I see so much of myself in you, but I see so much more potential than I have. One of these days, I'll be the one who can't make it to the Naka Shrine while you chase me. And when that day comes, I'll let you rub it in my face as much as you want, okay? Now come on, let's get home." He helped Itachi stand. Together, the two of them walked back home, meeting up with Sasuke and Naruto. They saw Fugaku and Itachi coming, and they ran over to him. "Itachi, did you do it? Did you get away?" Itachi smiled to hide his disappointment. "No, I didn't. I was caught a half-foot from the door." Naruto's eyes lit up. "Cool, that's a new record." Sasuke was impressed too. A half-foot, that's basically a victory. Fugaku smiled. "It would have been if I hadn't used my Mangekyo." Naruto and Sasuke both looked even more awestruck. "Your secret jutsu?" Naruto shouted. "That says a lot if you had to break that out with just us," Sasuke said. Fugaku laughed. "Yep, it means you boys are really getting strong. Probably in the next year, you'll all beat me to the Naka Shrine." It was then that Fugaku looked up and saw Hiruzen standing by the door to his home. His face displayed a darkness on it that Fugaku hadn't seen since the Nine Tails escaped. He patted the boys on the head. "Why don't you go inside and play? I'm going to talk to Lord Hiruzen." The boys then ran off to play some more. Fugaku walked up to Hiruzen. "I know that look. Something really bad has happened. What is it?" Hiruzen took a deep breath as if trying to decide how he was going to say this. "It's about the Hyuga Clan." And that's the end of it. What did you think? Did you enjoy it? If so, tell me about it in the comments. Honestly, this was one of the stories I was most excited about making. Ever since I wrote What If Neji Didn't Die, I've had this one in my holster, and I hope I did it justice. But honestly, I had as much fun writing about the Uchiha game of tag as I did writing about Neji. But let me know what you think, and things you'd like to see happen in the future. Until next time, peace out.
Did you enjoy our video? Well then be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.